A combat-injured military working dog has a 50% chance of dying before reaching a surgeon. At 2:17 in the morning, that statistic came crashing through the doors of a small-town veterinary clinic. A Belgian Malinois, bleeding from shrapnel wounds, collapsed on the floor, but the classified microchip in his collar was transmitting a signal the government would kill to keep silent. And the young vet who saved him was the only person it was meant to find. That vet was Dr. Aaron Hayes, a 27-year-old who left the army to mend animals, not soldiers. She had no idea the dog on her table was a Tier 1 asset, or that the silicon sliver in his collar held targeting data for a mission that never officially happened. But the men in the black SUVs speeding toward her clinic knew. And they had one order: retrieve the chip and erase every witness, including the woman whose service file was supposed to stay buried forever. Aaron Hayes lived by a simple rule: animals were better than people. They didn't lie, they didn't betray, and they always remembered kindness. Her clinic, Pine Ridge Animal Care, was a one-woman operation 30 miles from the nearest military base, a deliberate choice. Here, the most complicated case was a cat with diabetes or a cow with bloat. Until that night. The Malinois came in just after 2 a.m., a client pounding on the glass door. Erin was asleep in the small apartment above the clinic, a habit from her residency days. She threw on her white coat, the one with the faded embroidered name, and rushed downstairs. The dog was named Zeus, according to the worn tag on his standard civilian collar, but everything else about him screamed military. The muscle tone of an athlete, the focused, assessing gaze that scanned the room not in fear but in tactical awareness, and the wounds, 3 distinct, jagged laceration patterns across his shoulder and flank. Shrapnel, not from a car accident or a fight with another animal. The metallic fragments she extracted under local anesthetic were twisted, heat-hedged. Explosive ordnance. She worked with a calm that felt automatic. Pressure, clamp, irrigation. The dog, despite his pain, remained preternaturally still, watching her hands. He only flinched once when her stethoscope brushed a second collar hidden beneath the first. It was a sleek black polymer band, no buckle, seamless, and at its center a small, warm bump, a microchip, but unlike any subcutaneous ID chip she'd ever scanned. This one was externally mounted, and it was faintly pulsing with a soft, red LED glow. Her own scanner yielded nothing. Government frequency, a part of her brain supplied, the part she kept locked away. She pushed the thought down and focused on suturing. As she finished the last stitch, her computer at the reception desk, left on from the day, chimed softly. An automated alert from the clinic's external security camera. Headlights, 2 sets, turning off the main road onto her long, gravel driveway. No one made house calls at 2:45 in the morning. The dog's head lifted. A low, rumbling growl vibrated through the exam table, not at her, at the door. The vehicles were black Chevrolet Suburbans, windows tinted to opacity. They parked not in the client lot but directly in front of the clinic doors, blocking exit. 4 men emerged. They didn't move like police or deputies. Their movements were synchronized, economical. They wore dark civilian clothes, but their posture was rigid, their eyes scanning the tree line, the roof, the shadows. One remained by the lead vehicle, speaking into a wrist-mounted radio. The other 3 approached the door. The leader, a man with a close-cropped beard and eyes that missed nothing, didn't knock. He tried the handle. Finding it locked, he rapped on the glass, 3 sharp, definitive taps. Erin's heart hammered against her ribs. The dog was now standing on the table, weight shifted forward, every muscle coiled. The message was clear: threat identified. She took a deep breath, the kind she used to take before a patrol rolled out, and walked to the door. She flipped the lock and opened it just enough to see the man's face. "Clinic's closed," she said, her voice steady. "Emergency line is on the sign." "Dr. Hayes?" the man asked. His voice was flat, devoid of courtesy. "Yes. We need the animal you just treated, and the data module in its tactical collar, immediately." The specificity froze her. The hidden collar, the data module. This wasn't a lost pet recovery. I have a patient recovering from surgery, she said, playing the part of the indignant civilian vet. You can't just... The animal is designated U.S. government property, serial number Delta 97 Victor, the man interrupted, reciting the code as if reading a parts list. Its retrieval is a matter of national security. Stand aside. National security. The words hung in the cold night air. The man behind him shifted, his jacket pulling slightly to reveal the butt of a sidearm in a tactical holster. The dog in the treatment room let out a single sharp bark, a warning. The leader's eyes snapped past Aaron into the clinic. The chip doctor now, or we secure it ourselves. Every instinct told her to comply, to hand over the dog the strange collar and go back to her life. But the image of the Malinois, silently trusting her as she stitched his wounds, flashed in her mind. Government property. He was a living being, not a piece of hardware. And the chip, it was warm. It was active. What was it transmitting? I need to see identification, Aaron said, stalling, and a warrant, or a transfer of custody form from whatever base he's from. A faint, humorless smile touched the man's lips. He reached into his inner pocket and produced a black leather credential holder. He flipped it open. The badge was unfamiliar, a geometric eagle design, no department name. The ID card next to it had his photo, a name, J. Miller, and a single line, Department of Defense, Special Activities Division. It was the kind of ID that had all the authority and none of the accountability. The paperwork is classified, Miller said. The dog, the chip. This is your last request before we proceed. The threat was implicit. The man by the car had now moved to the clinic's side, peering into a window. They were surrounding the building. Erin's mind raced. She thought of the chip's pulse, a transmitting GPS beacon, a data drive. If it was so critical, why was it on a wounded dog loose in the countryside? Unless the dog wasn't lost, unless he was running. She made a decision. The dog is under anesthesia, she lied. Moving him now could kill him. You can have the collar, it's in the back. Miller studied her for a long second, then gave a curt nod. Show me. She led them into the treatment room. Zeus stood calmly on the table, but his eyes tracked the three men as they filed in. The room felt suddenly, dangerously small. Aaron pointed to the black collar which she had placed on a sterile tray. There. Miller didn't touch it. He nodded to one of his men who produced a small, shielded case from a bag. Using tweezers, the man carefully lifted the collar and placed it inside the case, sealing it with a hiss. Miller's posture relaxed a fraction, one objective complete. Then his eyes landed on the exam table. On the second, ordinary leather collar with the name tag Zeus. On the fresh, neat sutures lining the dog's side. His gaze traveled up to Erin's face, then down to the name stitched on her coat. Hayes. Something shifted in his expression. The cold efficiency wavered, replaced by a flicker of scrutiny. Hayes, he repeated quietly. He turned fully to face her. What's your first name, doctor? Aaron, she said, the dread coiling in her stomach. Aaron Hayes. He said it slowly, testing the weight of it. His eyes narrowed. Formerly of the Army Veterinary Corps, attached to the 120th Support Battalion, stationed at Bagram, Afghanistan, discharged 5 years ago under administrative review. The air left the room. He hadn't looked her up on a phone, he knew it, from memory. A lot of vets served over there, she said, her voice tighter now. Not like you, Captain, Miller said, the rank hitting her like a physical blow. Your final evaluation was sealed by a DOD tribunal. The details of your detachment from the Canine Special Operations Support Team were erased. Officially, you were never there. The other two men now looked at her differently. She was no longer a civilian obstacle. She was a variable, a classified variable. Zeus let out another low growl, sensing the spike in tension. Miller took a step closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper only she could hear. The dog isn't the only asset that went missing from a training exercise 2 nights ago, Captain Hayes. The handler is dead, and the mission data on that chip you just handed us is the only copy. Anyone else who has seen it, who knows it exists, presents a critical security breach. He let the implication hang. The handler was dead. An accident, the dog wounded fleeing, the chip being hunted. And now they knew who she was. They knew she had seen the dog, touched the chip, understood its significance. Her buried service record wasn't just a secret, it was a target painted on her back. Miller's radio crackled, the man outside. "Sir, we've got a second signal, faint, but it's here. The backup transmit pulse, it's not from the collar." All eyes turned to the computer on Aaron's desk. The screen, which had gone to sleep, now glowed with a single blinking dialog box from a deep-level system diagnostic program she never installed. It read, "Data stream intercepted, decryption in progress, source, biometric sensor." The sensor, it wasn't just in the collar. Miller's head snapped toward Zeus, then to the surgical instruments on the tray, to the sutures in the dog's side. His face went pale with realization. The microchip wasn't the primary device. It was a relay. The real data storage, the biometric sensor monitoring the dog's vital signs and location, was sewn into the animal's body. And Aaron Hayes, during emergency surgery, had just connected it to her clinic's network. She had downloaded the entire, classified mission archive directly into her computer. The lead soldier's hand moved toward his weapon. "Secure the doctor," Miller said, his voice cold and final, "and purge the entire system, every byte." In the space between Miller's order and the soldier's draw, the dog moved. Zeus didn't bark. He launched, a 65-pound missile of muscle and intent, clearing the exam table and hitting the nearest soldier square in the chest. The man crashed into a cabinet of surgical supplies, glass shattering. The second soldier's weapon cleared its holster, but Aaron was already moving, a reflex she thought she'd buried. She swept a metal instrument tray off the counter, sending scalpels and hemostats clattering across the floor, creating a barrier of noise and confusion. Miller shouted, "Don't fire, the data is in the animal." But it was too late. The soldier with the gun was trying to track the blur of the Malinois, who had pivoted and was now driving toward Miller himself. Aaron didn't stay to fight. She dove for the computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The decryption progress bar was at 87%. She yanked the Ethernet cable from the wall, killing the external connection, but the local download continued. She needed the hard drive. With a surgeon's violence, she smashed the side panel of the desktop tower, her fingers scrambling for the SATA connector. A hand clamped on her shoulder, spinning her around. Miller, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Step away." Behind him, Zeus had the other soldier's forearm in his mouth, not biting down, but holding with relentless pressure, his body braced against the pull. The dog was using non-lethal restraint. He was still following his training. Aaron drove her elbow backward, not at Miller, but into the open tower case. Her hand closed around the 3.5-inch hard drive, and she ripped it free, cables snapping. "The drive is corrupted," she yelled, a desperate bluff. "The purge protocol you trigger will fry the only copy. Is that what you want?" Miller hesitated, his eyes darting from the dog to the drive in her hand. The calculus was visible. Secure the asset, eliminate the witness, but preserve the mission. The conflicting orders created a fatal delay. That's when the lights went out. Not just in the clinic. The entire property plunged into absolute blackness, the hum of the refrigerators dying mid-cycle. The only light came from the dying embers of the computer screen and the faint, now urgent red pulse emanating from Zeus's side. The internal biometric sensor. "They're here," Miller whispered, his professional detachment cracking into something like fear. He keyed his radio. "Bravo team, report. Bravo team." Silence. From outside, a new sound replaced the crickets. The soft, almost inaudible crunch of gravel under specialized boots, multiple points of approach. Professional, and they just cut the power grid. Miller's priority shifted instantly. Contain the doctor. Secure the animal. We are leaving, he barked to his remaining man, who was prying his arm from Zeus's grip. But Zeus had already released him. The dog was at Erin's side, pressing against her leg, his head swiveling toward the clinic's back door, the one that led to the kennel runs and the woods beyond. He whimpered, a short, urgent sound. Not fear, a warning, an instruction. They weren't the only ones hunting the dog, and the new players didn't care if the data survived. Erin made a choice. She shoved the hard drive into the deep pocket of her veterinary coat. Then she grabbed two things from the counter in the dark, a pair of bandage scissors and a disposable syringe of broad-spectrum antibiotic. She dropped to one knee beside Zeus. I need you to trust me, she breathed, her hands finding the fresh sutures on his flank. With the scissors, she snipped 2 stitches. The dog stiffened but didn't pull away. She inserted the syringe needle not into muscle, but into the small subcutaneous pocket she had just opened. She injected the antibiotic, a sterile fluid that would create a temporary buffer. Then, with her fingers, she probed gently past the muscle layer. Her fingertips met a smooth, rigid capsule, smaller than a jelly bean, adhered to the tissue. The primary data storage. She hooked it with the tip of the scissors and slid it free. It was warm and still blinking. She palmed it just as the clinic's front window exploded inward. Not from a bullet. From a canister that hit the floor with a metallic clang and began spewing thick white smoke. Visual denial. They weren't shooting to kill. They were shooting to disorient and capture. Miller and his soldier were coughing, stumbling backward. Gas, move, Miller choked out. In the blinding smoke, Erin felt Zeus's teeth close gently on the sleeve of her coat. He pulled, insistent. She followed, crawling low beneath the smoke toward the back door. She fumbled for the deadbolt, threw it open, and stumbled into the cold night air, the dog at her heels. She didn't look back. She ran for the tree line at the edge of her property, the woods that stretched toward the national forest. Behind her, she heard shouts, the sound of doors being kicked open, then 2 suppressed gunshots. Flat, quiet pops. A message had been sent. She ran until her lungs burned, Zeus matching her pace effortlessly. Only when the lights of her clinic were completely swallowed by the pines did she stop, leaning against a tree, the hard drive and the biogel capsule burning in her hand. She looked at Zeus. He sat watching the trail, his ears rotating like satellite dishes, processing every night sound. He wasn't just a carrier. He was a guardian, and the data inside him was so valuable, 2 separate government factions were willing to kill for it. She had to see what it was. Using her phone's flashlight, she examined the biogel capsule. It was a sealed unit, no ports. It would need a specific reader. The hard drive was standard but encrypted. She needed a computer, but every network connection would be a beacon. Then she remembered. Her old laptop, the one from her army days with the modified firmware and the air gap modification. It could read secured hardware without an internet connection. She kept it as a relic, stored in a waterproof case buried under a marker stone near her favorite hiking trail. A paranoid habit from her old life. A habit that might now save her life. It took an hour of moving through the woods to reach the spot. She dug up the case, the laptop inside still holding a charge. In the absolute darkness of the forest, she connected the clinic's hard drive via a universal adapter. The decryption had completed at 99% when she pulled the plug. She ran a brute force bypass using an old algorithm she wasn't supposed to know. The file directory opened. It wasn't mission coordinates or weapon schematics. The primary folder was labeled Aurora Protocol. Inside were hundreds of files, veterinary reports, neurological scans, behavioral logs, and video files. She clicked the most recent. The video showed a kennel, sterile and white. Zeus was in a harness connected to a bank of monitors. A man in a lab coat spoke off-screen. Subject Delta 97 Victor. Implant integration day 45. The synaptic bridge is holding. We are achieving direct neural feedback. The subject is now responding to digital commands without audio or visual cues. The battlefield application is imminent. The video cut to a field exercise. Zeus, wearing a camera on his head, moved through a mock village. He didn't follow a handler. He moved with unnatural precision, pausing at doors, scanning corners, his movements dictated by something else. The camera feed showed a data overlay in his visual field: thermal signatures, weapon identifications, threat assessments. The dog was being remotely piloted. He was a living drone. Aaron felt sick. This wasn't a military working dog program. This was a biotechnology weapons project. They had implanted a neural interface in Zeus's brain, turning his superior senses into a real-time surveillance and attack platform controlled from miles away. The next video file was dated 3 days ago. It showed an alert screen: protocol breach. Primary handler, Staff Sergeant J. Reyes, initiated manual override. Subject in egress. Sergeant Reyes, the dead handler. He hadn't died in an accident. He had discovered what they were doing to his dog. He had tried to free Zeus to remove the implant, and he had been killed for it. The training exercise was a cover story. Zeus had been wounded in the escape. The final file was an administrative memo. It listed the project's oversight and funding. It was a joint venture between the Department of Defense's Advanced Research Wing and a private defense contractor, Kronos Dynamics. The legal sign-off, the authority that greenlit the use of live animal subjects and the classification of the entire program, was signed by a retired Rear Admiral. The name was Arthur Hayes. Her father. The forest floor seemed to tilt beneath her. Arthur Hayes, the stern, distant man who'd pushed her toward the army, who'd called her decision to become a veterinarian a waste of service. He had known. He had signed the papers that created this monstrosity. He had buried her career to keep her quiet, not to protect her, but to protect this. The betrayal was so vast it felt like a vacuum, but it also snapped the last piece into place. Miller's team wasn't from some shadowy special activities division. They were Kronos Dynamics corporate security. They weren't here to recover government property. They were here to clean up a corporate liability and retrieve their billion-dollar prototype. And they had her father's full authority to do so. The other team, the ones who cut the power and used gas, they were different. Possibly real government trying to seize the technology from the corporate group, or a rival contractor. In the crossfire, she and Zeus were expendable witnesses. Zeus nuzzled her hand, bringing her back. She looked into his eyes, this animal who had been turned into a weapon, who had somehow retained enough of himself to seek help, to protect. The implant wasn't just for control. The files showed it could also induce pain, paralysis, or system shutdown. They had a remote kill switch for the dog. As if on cue, Zeus suddenly yelped, a sharp, pained sound. He shuddered, his legs buckling for a second before he caught himself. A trickle of blood seeped from his nose. They were trying to activate the shutdown protocol. They were close, and they were scanning for his implant's signal. Aaron slammed the laptop shut. They had to move. They had to get far away from any population center. And she had to find a way to remove that implant before Kronos could turn Zeus into a puppet again, or worse, turn his own nervous system against him. But she had one advantage. She knew the architecture of the implant. The project files included the schematics. It was powered by a tiny, rechargeable cell that drew energy from the dog's own body heat. To disable it remotely, they needed a clear signal. To disable it permanently, she needed to perform surgery in a shielded environment, a Faraday cage that would block all radio waves. She knew of only one place nearby that could work: the old decommissioned Air Force radar station up in the mountains, built during the Cold War. Its operations bunker was a literal Faraday cage, designed to withstand electromagnetic pulses. It was a 5-hour hike through rugged terrain, and Kronos and whoever else was out there would be hunting them every step of the way. She packed the laptop and the drives. She looked at Zeus, who was panting slightly, a glazed look of confusion in his eyes. The implant was interfering with his neural functions. "We're going to fix this," she whispered. "I promise." She took a first step deeper into the wilderness, the dog falling in beside her. She was no longer just a vet protecting a patient. She was a soldier on a mission, carrying evidence that could bring down a powerful conspiracy. And the man who had sent the hunters was the same man who had given her his last name. As dawn began to bleed light over the ridge, a new sound echoed through the valley below. Not helicopters, the lower, persistent thrum of unmanned aerial vehicles. Drones. They were no longer searching. They were tracking, and they had just picked up the scent. The drones didn't shoot, they herded. Two quadcopters, matte black and silent as owls, settled into a holding pattern 50 yards to Aaron's left and right. Their cameras, glinting in the first gray light of dawn, tracked her and Zeus's every move through the dense pines. When she tried to angle east, the drone on that side dipped lower, emitting a sharp, pulsed sonic tone that made Zeus cower and whine. When she turned west, the other mirrored the maneuver. They were funneling her on a specific heading, north, deeper into the steepest, most rugged part of the mountain pass. They wanted her alive, but trapped. They were waiting for the ground teams to catch up. Erin's mind raced. She had to break their tracking. She pulled Zeus behind a thick outcrop of granite, momentarily out of the drone's direct line of sight. From her coat pocket, she pulled the biogel capsule, the primary implant. It was still faintly warm, still emitting its signal. That's what they were homing in on. But if she destroyed it, she destroyed the only physical evidence of the neural interface and the data it contained. Unless... She opened the laptop again, her fingers numb with cold. She navigated to the implant schematics. There it was, the transponder frequency. It was a simple, constant pulse, easy to mimic. She scoured the ground, finding a smooth, fist-sized river stone. She took the bandaged scissors and carefully pried open the biogel capsule. Inside was a tiny, complex circuit board adhered to a sliver of what looked like neural tissue. The source of the signal was a pea-sized quartz oscillator. With the tip of the scissors, she popped it free. She then scraped a shallow hole in the dirt, placed the stone inside, and set the still-blinking oscillator on top of it. She covered it loosely with leaves. It would keep broadcasting from this spot, creating a stationary beacon. "Come on," she whispered to Zeus. She grabbed the now-silent capsule core and the laptop, and they moved, crouching low, away from the outcrop, angling southwest instead of north. For 10 minutes, nothing changed. The drones held their positions. Then a new, larger shadow passed overhead, a fixed-wing drone with a wider wingspan. It circled the area where she'd buried the oscillator twice. The two quadcopters abruptly broke formation and zipped toward that spot, hovering low. They'd taken the bait. She and Zeus pushed harder, putting distance between them and the decoy. But the relief was short-lived. Zeus began to lag, his breathing becoming labored. The earlier nosebleed was a bad sign. The implant wasn't just for control. The files indicated it also administered neurostimulants and suppressants to keep the subject compliant. With the primary capsule removed, those chemicals were no longer being regulated. His body was going into withdrawal, or worse, the implant's residual systems were triggering a defensive toxin release to incapacitate the host. She needed to get to the radar station, now. By mid-morning, they reached the foot of the final climb. The old Air Force facility was a series of decaying concrete domes and antenna arrays perched on a barren plateau. The main access road was washed out, but a service trail, overgrown and treacherous, remained. As they started up, a new sound joined the mountain wind, the distant thump of helicopter rotors. Not the slow, heavy beat of a military transport, but the faster, agile pulse of private aviation. Kronos was bringing in the heavy team. They were out of time. Aaron found the entrance to the operations bunker, a rusted steel blast door set into the hillside, partially concealed by brush. The lock was a simple mechanical combination, long since seized shut. She used a rock to bash the mechanism until it broke inward. The door swung open with a groan, revealing a dark, stale-smelling tunnel. Inside, it was a time capsule from the 1960s. Banks of dead switchboards, giant reel-to-reel tape machines under sheets of dust, and in the center of the main room, a raised platform holding the primary radar console, all of it housed within a cage of copper mesh, the Faraday enclosure. She led Zeus inside the cage and pulled the mesh door shut. The moment it clicked, the constant, low-grade anxiety humming in her own nerves seemed to dampen. The silence was absolute. No drone buzz, no radio static. They were invisible. But Zeus was getting worse. He lay down on the cold concrete, panting, a thin string of saliva dripping from his mouth. His eyes were losing focus. She had to operate. Using her phone's light, she laid out the makeshift surgical kit from her vet pack. The scissors, a roll of sterile suture, a bottle of antiseptic, a pocket knife sterilized with a lighter. She had no anesthesia, no monitors. This would be blind, brutal, and based on memory of the schematics. She shaved a small patch on Zeus's neck, just behind the skull where the neural interface would have been inserted. She made the incision. The dog tensed but didn't move, his trust in her absolute even now. She probed gently, and her fingers found it, not a chip, but a delicate, spider-web-like mesh of filaments fused to the vertebrae and snaking upward into the brainstem. It wasn't designed to be removed. It was designed to be permanent. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, and began the painstaking work of dissecting the filaments. Each one, as she severed it, caused a tiny muscle twitch in Zeus's body. After the 5th cut, his panting slowed. After the 10th, his eyes cleared slightly. She was disabling the interface, but she couldn't remove it all. The deepest filaments were embedded in tissue she couldn't reach without killing him. Finally, she sutured the incision. Zeus lifted his head, licked her hand once and laid it back down, exhausted but present. The artificial haze was gone from his eyes. He was himself again. In the absolute quiet, Aaron finally opened the laptop. With no external signals, TO Chinese letter, she could dive deeper into the Aurora files. She bypassed the veterinary logs and went straight to the project directives and financials. What she found made her blood run cold. Aurora wasn't a DoD project that Kronos helped with. It was a Kronos project that the DoD had partially funded for feasibility studies. The real application wasn't battlefield reconnaissance. The memos talked about urban pacification, crowd control, and high-value asset retrieval in non-permissive environments. They were developing this for use on domestic soil. A remotely controlled canine that could infiltrate, incapacitate, or eliminate a target without a human ever being present. The perfect deniable weapon. And the funding trails led further than her father. They led to shell corporations, which led to a private equity fund that held massive investments in prison construction and private security contracting. The people bankrolling Aurora stood to make billions from the social unrest the technology was designed to manage. Her father wasn't just a military bureaucrat signing off on a sketchy project. He was a key advisor, a bridge between Kronos and the Pentagon, ensuring the funding flowed and the oversight was minimal. Her own discharge, the sealed tribunal, it was all to remove a potential critic from the board, his own daughter. The betrayal was complete, but as she scrolled, a new file hidden within hidden directories caught her eye. It was labeled Zeta Protocol Contingency. It was dated the day after Sergeant Reyes died. She opened it. It was an authorization for a field termination of Subject Delta 97 Victor. And the secondary target, any former military personnel with knowledge of the canine special operations, support team protocols who made contact with the subject. The authorization signature wasn't her father's. It was Miller's. Miller wasn't corporate security. He was CIA attached to a special liaison office within Kronos. The company had a wet work contract. The team at her clinic hadn't been there to clean up a liability. They'd been there to execute one, and they had failed. The document listed the approved method, a neurotoxin keyed to the implant's chemical reservoir. It would cause catastrophic brain hemorrhage, mimicking a natural stroke. Untraceable. That's what had been happening to Zeus. Miller's team had triggered the kill protocol remotely when they couldn't secure him. The drone herding, the waiting, they weren't trying to recapture him. They were corralling him until the toxin finished its job, and then they would collect the body and the implant. Zeus was still dying, just slowly. Aaron slammed a fist against the console. They were in a shielded cage, but the toxin was already in his system. She needed an antitoxin, a counteragent. She frantically searched the files. There had to be a safety protocol, a medical override. She found it, buried in a subfolder for veterinary medical staff. A chemical formula, a compound that could neutralize the toxin if administered within 12 hours of activation. She had maybe 2 hours left. The formula listed the components. One was a common veterinary sedative, Reversar. She had that in her pack. The other was a synthetic enzyme, codenamed Theta-7. The file noted that Theta-7 was experimental, unstable, and only stored at 2 locations: the primary Chronos research lab 80 miles away, and a secure storage locker at the regional DoD logistics depot, the same depot where her father kept his on-site office. The world shrunk to a single, impossible point. To save Zeus, she needed Theta-7. To get Theta-7, she had to walk into the heart of the military base she'd been exiled from and break into a secure pharmaceutical vault. And the only person with the access codes to that vault was Rear Admiral Arthur Hayes. She looked at Zeus, whose breathing had become shallow and ragged. The loyal animal who had chosen to run to a vet for help, who had protected her, who was now suffering because of human greed. She closed the laptop. The Faraday cage had protected them from signals, but it was also a prison. To leave was to step back into the crosshairs of Miller's drones and ground teams. To stay was to let Zeus die. There was no choice. She packed her things, her mind already mapping the route to the depot. It would mean going down the mountain, skirting towns, avoiding main roads. She'd have to use the very evasion tactics she'd been trained in and had hoped to forget. As she pushed open the heavy blast door, the daylight felt like an invasion. The mountain was silent, no drones, for now. They had probably concluded their target was dead in the bunker, the signal lost. It bought her a little time. She turned for one last look at the radar station, this temporary sanctuary. Zeus stood beside her, leaning against her leg for support. His mission was over. Hers was just beginning. She wasn't just going to steal a cure. She was going to walk into her father's office and demand it. And she was going to bring the storm of truth with her. Getting onto the depot was easier than she expected. Her old military ID, though officially deactivated, still triggered the green light at the pedestrian gate of the logistics support area. The guard, a young private, gave her a cursory glance and waved her through, more concerned with his phone than the woman in a stained veterinary coat with a large dog at her side. The mundane security was the flaw in every sophisticated system. Humans, bored at 3 in the afternoon. The depot was a sprawling complex of warehouses and administrative buildings. Building 12, pharmaceutical and biomedical storage, was a windowless concrete block with a keypad entry. Her father's office was in the adjacent command building. She left Zeus hidden behind a dumpster in an alley, promising to return. His eyes, still too glassy, followed her until she turned the corner. She didn't go to her father's office. She went to the base's small, nondescript chapel. Inside, she used the landline phone to call his direct line, the number still etched in her memory. "Admiral Hayes," he answered, his voice the same dry, impatient bark. "It's Aaron." The silence on the line was absolute, then filled with a sharp intake of breath. "Where are you?" "Close. I have the Aurora data, all of it. and I have subject Delta 97 Victor. He's dying from the Zeta Protocol toxin. I need the Theta 7 counteragent. Now." Another silence, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was low, stripped of rank, just tired. "You shouldn't have gotten involved. You made me involved when you signed my discharge papers to cover up a war crime," she shot back, her voice trembling with pent-up fury. "The storage locker, Dad, the access code. Give it to me and I walk away. You never hear from me again." "It's not that simple," he said. "Miller is here." Her blood went cold. "In your office. In the building, they know you're coming. They've tapped every line, flagged every access log. The code I give you will trigger an alert. It's a trap." Erin closed her eyes. Of course it was. "Then give me the real code," she said, "and a way out." He was quiet for so long she thought he'd hung up. Then he spoke, so softly she barely heard. "Locker 74 Alpha. Code is 97 Victor 1. My override. There's a secondary exit from the storage room, leads to the steam tunnels. They go under the fence to the old motor pool. I'll create a distraction in 15 minutes." He was helping her after everything. "Why?" she whispered. "Because Reyes was a good soldier," her father said, his voice cracking. "And that dog trusted him, and you're my daughter. 15 minutes. The line went dead. She moved. Building 12's side door was propped open by a janitor's cart. She slipped inside. The interior was cold, brightly lit, rows of sealed lockers lining the walls. She found 74 Alpha. Her fingers shook as she punched in the code. 97 Victor 1. The lock clicked open. Inside, on a refrigerated shelf, were 10 small vials of clear liquid, labeled Theta 7. She grabbed 2, shoving them into her coat pocket. As she turned, the main lights in the hallway flickered and died, replaced by dim red emergency bulbs. Her father's distraction. She found the secondary exit, a heavy door marked mechanical. It led down a narrow stairwell into the humid, dripping labyrinth of the steam tunnels. She ran, the directions from her childhood memory of base maps guiding her. Left at the main junction, right after the pressure gauges, then 300 yards straight. Behind her, she heard shouts and bootsteps echoing in the tunnels. Miller's team was in the system. She burst out of a hatch into the abandoned motor pool, a graveyard of old trucks. Zeus was where she left him. He struggled to stand. There was no time to mix the compound here. She needed a sterile environment. Her clinic was compromised. There was only one other place. She helped Zeus into the cab of a rusted, decommissioned ambulance that still had its keys dangling from the visor, part of the depot's museum display. It started with a cough and a roar. She drove straight through the motor pool's chain-link fence, the old vehicle shuddering as it ripped through. She drove to the only place she knew had a sterile surgical suite that wasn't on a grid, the mobile veterinary unit operated by her friend, Ben, a large animal vet who worked the county fair circuit. His truck was parked in a storage lot on the edge of town. Ben took one look at her, at the military dog, and asked no questions. He fired up the generator, lit the surgical lights in the back of his truck, and handed her his kit. "What do you need?" "A quiet place to work," she said. As Ben stood watch outside, Erin mixed the Theta 7 with the Reversar. She injected it into Zeus's IV line. For a terrifying minute, nothing happened. Then the dog's body convulsed once, a violent tremor. He vomited a small amount of dark fluid, and then his breathing deepened, steadied. The awful rasping sound ceased. The glassy film cleared from his eyes. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and his tail gave a single, weak thump against the surgical table. She slumped against the wall, tears of relief finally coming. He was going to live. The sound of approaching vehicles cut the moment short. Not sirens, the quiet, powerful engines of black SUVs. Ben looked in, panic on his face. Erin. She had one vial of Theta 7 left, and all the data. Miller would never stop. Her father's distraction had bought her time, not freedom. She made a decision. She handed Ben the remaining vial. If they take him, they'll try again. This is the only antidote. Hide it." Then she took the laptop, the hard drive, and the biogel capsule. She walked out of the mobile unit into the open storage lot, holding the evidence above her head. 3 Suburbans skidded to a halt, forming a semicircle around her. Miller stepped out, his face a stone mask. No soldiers this time, just him. "It's over, Captain," he said. "It is," Erin agreed. She nodded to the laptop bag at her feet. "The Aurora files, the financial trails, the Zeta Protocol authorization with your signature on it, it's all there, and it's already been uploaded." Miller's eyes narrowed. "Uploaded where? We've jammed every signal." "To a dead-drop server," Erin said, "with a 12-hour delay timer. If I don't log in and reset it by 1900 tonight, it sends everything to the servers of 3 major news networks, the chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee, and the Inspector General. The timer started the moment I left the radar station. You have 93 minutes. She was bluffing. She hadn't had the bandwidth or the time, but Miller didn't know that. He stared at her, calculating the risk. Calling her bluff meant potentially ending his career and seeing Kronos dismantled. "What do you want?" he finally asked, each word clipped. 3 things, Erin said. 1, the dog is officially listed as deceased in your records. He stays with me. 2, my service record is fully reinstated and cleared with an honorable discharge on my own terms. 3, you walk away, all of you. The Aurora project is shuttered and you make sure my father takes the fall for the oversight, not the low-level scientists. And in return, I give you the laptop and the drives. You get to say you recovered the assets. The data never leaks. The scandal stays contained within the Pentagon and Kronos. A quiet failure." Miller looked at the bag, then at her. The standoff stretched. Finally, he gave a single sharp nod. "The dog is dead. Your record will be cleared by end of day. The project is already being terminated." He took a step forward. "The drives." She kicked the bag toward him. He picked it up, opened the laptop, and scanned the directories. Seeing the core files, he powered it down. "If this leaks..." "It won't," Erin said. "I want my life back, not a war." Miller got back in his vehicle. The SUVs turned and drove away, leaving her standing alone in the dusty lot. Ben emerged from the mobile unit. "Holy hell, Erin, what was that?" "The end of it," she said, her whole body beginning to shake as the adrenaline faded. In the weeks that followed, the official notices arrived. Her military record was corrected, her discharge upgraded to honorable. A formal letter stated that certain classified projects she might have been tangentially aware of had been audited and discontinued due to ethical concerns. No names, no details. She heard through the grapevine that Rear Admiral Arthur Hayes had taken early retirement. There was no scandal, just a quiet departure. Zeus recovered fully. The light came back into his eyes, the playful spirit of a dog, not a weapon. Ben helped her forge adoption papers, listing Zeus as a rescued Belgian Malinois with an unknown past. She reopened Pine Ridge Animal Care. The clinic had been ransacked, but her insurance covered it. Her first patient back was a cat with a hairball. Her last of the day was Zeus, for a checkup on his healed incision. As she locked up that evening, a plain sedan pulled into the lot. A woman in a business suit got out. She introduced herself as an aide to the senator on the Armed Services Committee. "We received an anonymous packet," the woman said, "highly detailed, about a defense project called Aurora. The senator would like to speak with someone who has ground-level experience with canine combat trauma. Your name came up from your revised file. It would be a closed-door session. Protected." Erin looked at Zeus, sitting patiently by her side. He looked back, his head tilted. This was the real choice. Not to fight with weapons, but with truth. To use her knowledge not to wage war, but to prevent the next one. "I'll need to bring my dog," Erin said. "He's a vital part of my testimony." The woman smiled. "The senator loves dogs." As the car drove away, Erin knelt beside Zeus, running her hand over the scar on his flank where the implant had been. The hidden war was over. A new, different kind of service was beginning. One where the quiet ones, both human and animal, finally got to speak. Aaron Hayes' story is a fiction, but the silence it breaks is real. For decades, the fate of military working dogs was a classified footnote. They were listed as equipment, their injuries recorded as damage to government property, their loyalty a tactical resource to be expended. That dog on your screen represents over 1,600 canine service members deployed right now, their senses protecting patrols, their bodies often taking the first blast. The idea of a neural implant may seem like science fiction, but the drive to enhance, control, and weaponize animals is as old as warfare itself. Today's programs focus on superior breeding and training, creating animals with a 50% graduation rate into service. But the ethical line is always moving. What happens when technology offers the ultimate tool? A loyal soldier that never questions an order, even one given from a continent away. The most haunting parallel isn't in the technology. It's in the aftermath. Canine post-traumatic stress disorder is a documented, devastating reality. An estimated 5 to 10% of combat-deployed dogs exhibit symptoms: chronic anxiety, hypervigilance, a profound loss of purpose. They come home with the same invisible wounds as their handlers, yet for years, there was no official path for their retirement or healing. They were simply declared excess and put down. That changed because of people who refused to see them as equipment. Organizations like Mission K9 Rescue have fought to bring these heroes home, reuniting over 600 dogs with their handlers, proving that the bond forged in combat doesn't end when the uniform comes off. It's a bond Aaron and Zeus fought to keep, a bond that ultimately saved them both. So what is the real secret mission here? It's the story we don't tell. It's the soldier who finds more understanding in their dog than in any therapist's office. It's the veterinarian who patches up a wounded K9, unaware of the classified battles it has seen. It's the quiet network of civilians and veterans who work to give these four-legged soldiers the peaceful retirement they've earned. Every time a story like this makes you feel something, that protective anger, that swell of loyalty, that hope for a quiet, safe life for the hero, it's because at its core, it's true. The settings may be dramatized, but the sacrifice is not. The classified details may be invented, but the silence is real. If you believe these stories matter, that the unseen loyalty between soldiers and their dogs deserves to be honored, then your voice is part of that mission. Hit subscribe right now. By subscribing, you tell the algorithm that stories with depth, with heart, with something to say belong here. You help ensure that the next time a tale of hidden service and unbreakable bonds needs to be told, it finds an audience that will listen. Because the world is full of quiet heroes, on two legs and on four. And sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do is simply bear witness. Subscribe and stay for the stories that remind us what we're really protecting.